On February 3, 2025, President Donald Trump made headlines by signing an executive order to create the first-ever U.S. sovereign wealth fund, a significant move aimed at stabilizing the nation's economy and fulfilling a long-standing campaign promise. This initiative seeks to establish a national investment vehicle akin to those in oil-rich countries such as Norway, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi, which effectively use budget surpluses to invest in various markets and projects globally. Context and purpose of the fund. During a press conference in the Oval Office, Trump emphasized the need for the U.S. to have a sovereign wealth fund, stating, "I think it's about time that this country had a sovereign wealth fund." He hinted that the fund could potentially be used to finance the purchase of TikTok, a highly popular social media platform that has faced scrutiny and potential bans in the U.S. due to its Chinese ownership. Trump mentioned that the fund might be instrumental in keeping TikTok operational in America, suggesting that revenues from the fund could be earmarked for such acquisitions. The executive order mandates that the Treasury and Commerce Departments develop a comprehensive plan for the fund within 90 days. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent indicated a goal to operationalize the fund within the next year, although he did not specify potential sources of funding, especially in light of the persistent budget deficits that the U.S. has faced. Funding mechanisms and legislative challenges. The establishment of a sovereign wealth fund raises critical questions regarding its capitalization. Historically, sovereign wealth funds are financed through budget surpluses, a fiscal condition the U.S. has only achieved 5 times in the last 50 years, with the most recent instance occurring in 2001. Observers have pointed out that it is unclear how the Trump administration intends to fund this initiative given the ongoing budget deficits. One potential avenue for funding discussed by administration officials includes generating capital through new tariffs and exploring revenue from government contracts. For instance, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick suggested that the government could take equity stakes in companies it partners with, stating, "If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people." Broader economic implications. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund reflects a broader trend in American economic policy that has increasingly favored government intervention in markets to support domestic industries and diminish reliance on foreign competitors. Both the Trump and Biden administrations have leaned toward more proactive strategies to bolster American companies, marking a shift from the traditional free trade approach that has characterized U.S. policy for decades. The creation of this fund could potentially position the U.S. among the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, which often exceed $1 trillion in assets. Trump expressed confidence in this prospect, saying, "And I think in a short period of time, we'd have one of the biggest funds." This ambition aligns with the administration's goals of leveraging national resources for domestic investment while addressing contemporary challenges such as the TikTok controversy. Conclusion. As discussions regarding the U.S. sovereign wealth fund continue to develop, the effectiveness and feasibility of this initiative remain uncertain, particularly concerning funding sources and the necessary legislative framework. While the administration's vision aims to stabilize the economy and support strategic investments, it will require careful navigation of financial and legal challenges. The establishment of this fund represents a notable pivot in economic strategy under the Trump administration, with the potential to reshape the landscape of American investment and economic policy in the years to come. In summary, the creation of a sovereign wealth fund in the U.S. signifies a significant shift in economic strategy, aiming to leverage national resources for domestic investment while navigating the complexities of funding and legislative requirements. As the administration moves forward, stakeholders will be closely watching how this ambitious plan unfolds and its implications for the U.S. economy and beyond. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund under President Trump presents several counterintuitive aspects worth exploring. Here are some key points that highlight these contradictions. 1. Timing and fiscal health. The U.S. has been running significant budget deficits for many years, which contrasts sharply with the typical circumstances surrounding sovereign wealth funds. Countries like Norway and Saudi Arabia, which maintain such funds, usually do so with substantial budget surpluses from natural resource revenues. The idea of launching a sovereign wealth fund in a country with persistent deficits is counterintuitive, as it raises questions about the source of funding and the sustainability of such a financial vehicle. 2. Investment strategy and capitalization. Trump suggested that revenues from tariffs and other government contracts could be used to capitalize the fund. This approach is unconventional because sovereign wealth funds generally rely on surplus capital rather than funds generated from ongoing government operations or taxation. This raises concerns about whether the fund could operate effectively without stable and predictable revenue streams, especially in an environment where tariffs might create trade tensions and economic backlash. 3. Government intervention versus free market principles. The establishment of a sovereign wealth fund marks a significant shift from the traditional commitment to free market principles that have dominated U.S. economic policy for decades. Trump's initiative comes in the wake of a broader trend of increased government intervention in the economy, which some might argue is at odds with the foundational tenets of American capitalism. The fund's purpose, to stabilize the economy and invest in domestic projects, contradicts the long-standing preference for minimal state involvement in market dynamics. 4. Use of funds for strategic acquisitions. Trump's proposal to use the sovereign wealth fund for acquiring TikTok, a social media platform with contentious ownership dynamics, raises ethical and strategic questions. The notion that a government-owned fund would engage in buying stakes in private companies, particularly those that are foreign-owned, runs counter to many established economic norms. Typically, governments do not directly engage in market acquisitions to protect national interests in this manner, making the proposal a significant departure from conventional practices. 5. Legislative hurdles and governance. The executive order mandates the Treasury and Commerce Departments to devise a plan for the fund's creation within a short timeframe. However, the establishment of such a fund could require extensive legislative changes, complicating the swift implementation suggested by the administration. This juxtaposition between the urgency of action and potential legislative gridlock illustrates the inherent challenges in executing such a transformative economic policy. 6. Potential for mismanagement and political influence. The idea of a government-controlled investment fund raises concerns about political influence over investment decisions. Historically, sovereign wealth funds in other countries have been criticized for a lack of transparency and potential mismanagement. The prospect of a U.S. fund being subject to political whims, particularly under an administration known for its contentious and polarizing approach to governance, poses significant risks that contradict the objectives of stability and growth that such a fund is purported to embody. 7. Global positioning. Trump expressed ambitions for the U.S. sovereign wealth fund to become one of the largest in the world, akin to those in oil-rich nations. However, the feasibility of this vision is questionable given the current fiscal landscape and operational constraints. The idea that the U.S., a global economic leader, would model its sovereign wealth fund after smaller resource-rich nations reflects a paradox in its economic strategy, suggesting a reliance on models that have fundamentally different economic foundations. In summary, while the establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund under Trump's administration aims to address contemporary economic challenges and fulfill campaign promises, it embodies several counterintuitive elements that raise questions about its viability, ethical implications, and alignment with established economic principles. The interplay between ambitious goals and practical realities presents a complex landscape that will require careful navigation as details emerge. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund is ordered by President Trump on February 3, 2025. Is a pivotal moment in U.S. economic policy. While many discussions around this initiative focus on its potential benefits and challenges, several critical aspects may be overlooked that could have significant implications for the economy and governance. 1. Funding mechanisms and fiscal responsibility. One of the most significant points, often overshadowed, is the question of how the fund will be financed. The U.S. has been operating with a budget deficit for years, making it unclear where the capital to seed this fund will come from. The executive order suggests exploring new tariffs and equity stakes in government contracts as potential funding sources. However, this raises important concerns about fiscal responsibility and the potential impact of tariffs on consumers and businesses. The reliance on tariffs could lead to increased costs for American consumers and retaliatory actions from trading partners, undermining the very economic stability the fund aims to promote. Additionally, the idea of taking equity stakes in companies raises ethical and governance questions about government involvement in private enterprise and could lead to conflicts of interest. The long-term sustainability of the fund is contingent on these funding mechanisms being adequately addressed, making this a critical point of oversight. 2. Legislative hurdles and governance structure. The necessity of new legislation to establish the fund is another important aspect that may not receive adequate attention. The executive order tasks the Treasury and Commerce Departments with developing a plan within 90 days, but without clear legislative backing, the fund could face significant operational challenges. The governance structure of the fund will also be vital. Questions about accountability, transparency, and decision-making processes could complicate its establishment. If Congress does not pass necessary laws to support the fund, it could lead to a situation where the executive branch unilaterally controls significant financial resources, raising concerns about checks and balances in government. 3. Potential impact on domestic industries. The discussions around the sovereign wealth fund often highlight its potential for stabilizing the economy and investing in domestic industries. However, the implications of such investments could be multifaceted. The fund could prioritize certain sectors over others, which might distort market dynamics and hinder competition. Moreover, if the fund is used to acquire companies or invest heavily in specific industries, it could lead to government favoritism, where some companies receive preferential treatment over others based solely on their alignment with government priorities. This could create an uneven playing field, stifling innovation and competition in the long run. 4. Global implications and national security. The international ramifications of establishing a sovereign wealth fund are also significant. The fund's potential to acquire companies like TikTok raises national security concerns, particularly regarding data privacy and foreign influence. The U.S. government's direct involvement in such acquisitions might be seen as a move to protect national interests, but it could also escalate tensions with China and other countries, leading to potential retaliatory measures. Furthermore, positioning the U.S. in line with other countries that have sovereign wealth funds could prompt a re-evaluation of how international investments are perceived. The perception of the U.S. as a competitor rather than a partner in global markets could hinder international relations and trade agreements. 5. Impact on the nature of government intervention. The establishment of a sovereign wealth fund represents a significant shift in government economic intervention. The Trump administration's approach, combined with the previous Biden administration's interest in a similar fund, indicates a broader trend towards increased government involvement in the economy. This change could mark a departure from the traditional laissez-faire approach that has characterized U.S. economic policy for decades. The implications of this shift could reverberate through various sectors, influencing everything from regulatory frameworks to the way businesses operate. Conclusion. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund under President Trump raises many critical issues that extend beyond its immediate economic implications. The funding mechanisms, legislative requirements, governance structure, impact on domestic industries, global relations, and the nature of government intervention are all vital aspects that warrant closer examination. As discussions continue and details emerge, it will be essential for policymakers, analysts, and the public to engage with these issues to understand the fund's potential impact comprehensively. Overlooking these elements could result in significant challenges and unintended consequences as the U.S. navigates this new economic landscape. 1. Establishment and purpose of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The creation of the first U.S. sovereign wealth fund represents a significant shift in the American economic strategy, reflecting a broader trend of government intervention in the economy. This fund is intended to enhance economic stability by investing in diverse markets similar to successful models in oil-rich nations. The fund aims to stabilize the economy while potentially generating wealth for future generations, positioning the U.S. among other countries with substantial sovereign wealth funds. 2. Funding mechanisms and financial viability. A key point of discussion surrounding the fund is its capitalization. Given the U.S.'s ongoing budget deficits, the executive order tasks the Treasury and Commerce Departments with developing a funding strategy, but specifics remain vague. Proposed mechanisms include generating revenue through new tariffs and acquiring equity stakes in companies involved in government contracts. This raises questions about the financial viability of the fund, especially since the U.S. has only experienced budget surpluses a handful of times in recent decades. 3. Strategic investments and legislative challenges. The fund is envisioned not only to stabilize the economy but also to support targeted strategic investments in areas such as technology and infrastructure. However, establishing the fund may require new legislation reflecting potential hurdles in implementation. The executive order denotes a proactive approach to supporting domestic industries, a strategy that has gained traction under both the Trump and Biden administrations, further complicating the political landscape. 4. Implications for U.S. economic policy and global standing. The establishment of a sovereign wealth fund under the Trump administration could alter the U.S.'s global economic standing, especially as it aims to compete with established funds that typically exceed $1 trillion in assets. The fund's potential involvement in controversial acquisitions like TikTok highlights the intersection of national security and economic policy, illustrating the complexities of balancing domestic interests with global market dynamics. 1. Norway's government pension fund, Global GPFG. Established in 1990, this sovereign wealth fund is one of the largest in the world, primarily funded by the country's surplus revenues from petroleum. The GPFG was created to invest the surplus from the oil sector for the benefit of future generations, ensuring that the wealth generated from non-renewable resources would be sustainable and beneficial for the long-term economy. It operates under strict ethical guidelines and aims to maintain a diversified portfolio across various asset classes globally. 2. Abu Dhabi Investment Authority (ADIA). Founded in 1976, ADIA is one of the largest sovereign wealth funds globally, representing the Emirate of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. The fund manages a diverse portfolio of investments including equities, fixed income, real estate, and private equity. Its primary goal is to provide sustainable financial returns to support the Emirates' budget and future development initiatives. ADIA plays a crucial role in diversifying the economy of Abu Dhabi beyond oil dependence. 3. Russia's National Wealth Fund (NWF), established in 2008. The NWF is a sovereign wealth fund designed to support the pension system in Russia and to manage excess revenues from oil and gas exports. The fund is intended to stabilize the economy during times of budget deficits and to invest in domestic infrastructure projects. The NWF has been utilized to finance various initiatives, including investments in the Russian economy and as a backstop during economic downturns, demonstrating the fund's dual purpose of economic stabilization and investment for future growth. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund (SWF) under President Donald Trump marks a significant shift in American economic policy with potential long-term implications for both the domestic and global economic landscape. Here are several key predictions for the future based on the recent developments surrounding the SWF. 1. Sovereign wealth fund growth and functionality. If successfully implemented, the U.S. SWF could grow to become one of the largest in the world, potentially exceeding $1 trillion in assets. This would position the U.S. alongside established funds from nations like Norway and Saudi Arabia. The fund would likely focus on strategic investments in technology infrastructure and healthcare, aiming to bolster domestic industries and reduce reliance on foreign entities. 2. Funding mechanisms and challenges. The funding for the SWF will be a critical issue. Given the existing budget deficits, the administration may employ unconventional methods such as imposing new tariffs, acquiring equity stakes in companies involved in government contracts, or reallocating funds from other federal programs. However, these strategies could face significant political and legal challenges requiring congressional approval or new legislation, which may slow down the fund's operational timeline. 3. Economic stabilization and investment strategy. The SWF is expected to play a crucial role in stabilizing the U.S. economy, particularly in times of crisis. By investing in diversified assets, the fund could serve as a buffer against economic downturns. Investment strategies may include partnerships with private equity firms and venture capitalists to foster innovation and support American startups, especially in sectors deemed essential for national security and technological advancement. 4. U.S.-China relations and technology acquisition. A significant focus of the SWF, as indicated by Trump, could be acquiring assets like TikTok to mitigate national security concerns regarding Chinese ownership of U.S. technology. This move would likely lead to intensified scrutiny and regulatory measures against foreign tech companies operating in the U.S., further straining U.S.-China relations. The implications for technology transfer and cooperation between the two nations could be profound, affecting global supply chains and innovation dynamics. 5. Legislative and regulatory framework. The establishment of the SWF will necessitate a comprehensive legislative framework to govern its operations. This may involve creating an independent board to oversee fund management and ensure transparency and accountability. The potential for bipartisan support may exist given the shared interest in enhancing U.S. competitiveness, but significant divisions around funding sources and operational control could lead to contentious debates in Congress. 6. Public perception and political ramifications. Public perception of the SWF will play a pivotal role in its success. If the fund is perceived as a means of fostering economic growth and job creation, it could garner widespread support. Conversely, if it is seen as a tool for crony capitalism or mismanaged funds, it could lead to public backlash and political repercussions for the administration. The effectiveness of the fund's investments will be closely monitored, influencing future electoral outcomes. 7. Impact on global sovereign wealth trends. The US SWF could inspire other nations to reconsider their own investment strategies, potentially leading to a shift in the global landscape of sovereign wealth funds. As countries observe the US model, they may seek to establish similar funds or adapt existing ones to enhance their economic resiliency. This could foster increased competition among SWFs for global investment opportunities, impacting capital flows and market dynamics. 8. Interventionist economic policies. The establishment of the SWF aligns with a broader trend of increasing government intervention in the economy, a move that has gained traction under both the Trump and Biden administrations. This shift may signal a new era of economic nationalism, where strategic industries receive preferential treatment and protectionist measures are enacted more frequently to shield domestic companies from foreign competition. 9. Long-term economic strategy and future administrations. Regardless of the political landscape in the years to come, the SWF could become a cornerstone of U.S. economic strategy. Future administrations, regardless of party affiliation, may find it politically advantageous to build upon the foundation of the SWF, focusing on national security, technological advancement, and economic independence. This could lead to a sustained period of increased government involvement in economic affairs. Conclusion. The establishment of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund represents a transformative moment in American economic policy with far-reaching implications. As the fund begins to take shape, its funding mechanisms, investment strategies, and overall effectiveness will be closely scrutinized, shaping the future of U.S. economic policy and its role in the global economy. The outcomes of this initiative will not only impact the current administration but could also set the stage for how the U.S. interacts with economic challenges and opportunities for decades to come.